Okay, let's give it a go. Okay, so welcome everybody. What we're going to learn today, or we're going to work through a presentation on the circulatory system, and this forms really the first unit of your fitness instructor certificate. So the way it works is you're asked to complete a workbook as we go through. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a couple of pauses during this presentation to give you the opportunity to start working with your workbook. And then, but also kind of give you a couple of tasks that will sort of set you up. So you're not just sort of copying out of your textbook into your workbook. You should have a sort of be able to kind of formulate your own words and your own ideas. So the things that we're going to cover is really, the aim is really to introduce the structure and function of the circulatory system. It sounds, from what I gather, it seems like a few people have got quite a good sort of background in training, and so I think some of the terminology will be quite common to you, but others I think it might be useful for just kind of refine a bit of the knowledge and kind of just go over it again. So what we're looking to do by the end of this session is we're going to identify the location of the heart. So you need to be able to describe where the heart is in using kind of correct anatomical terms and without pointing. So we need to identify the location of the heart. We need to describe the function of the heart, the places that it pumps blood to. We need to broadly describe the structure. So we're talking about the kind of chambers, what goes in, what goes out, so the pipe work connected to the heart. We might consider the valves, why a heart would need valves, and we're talking about maybe which bits improve when we get fitter. So you might sort of think about which bits of the heart grow stronger when we get more aerobically fit. We're going to look at how blood moves through the four chambers of the heart. So I want you to be quite good at describing the relationship between the different chambers of the heart, the atria and the ventricles. We're going to describe the concepts of systemic and pulmonary circulation. We're going to describe the structure and function of blood vessels. So we're looking at arteries, veins, and capillaries. And we're going to do a little bit on blood pressure. This is quite a difficult topic, so this will kind of bleed over into the next session a little bit as well. So if everyone's happy, let's press on. So we're going to identify blood pressure classifications. That's tomorrow. Okay, so quick quiz. I just want to check everyone's sort of here. So I'm going to open up the chat box, and I've got 5 questions. Okay, so first question, and these are all cardiovascular related, so hopefully try and get you to just think about the terminology that we're working with. So number 1, how much blood does the average man have in his body? Okay, we've got a couple coming in. Anyone? So we've had an answer from Luke. Come on, everyone. Come on, Troy, where are you? Give me a deal. Crikey. Okay, thank you, Adil. Thank you, Troy. Well done. Who else have we got in? Kiana, Kai. Okay, let's see what we got. Who got it right? Oh, Tasha got it right. Okay, yeah, most people going a bit high actually. So actually, interestingly, we only have around between 5 and 6 liters, the average person. So when you think about it, that blood has to do an awful lot of work. You know, if we think about from a volume perspective, 5.6 liters, you've got just under 3 of those big, 2-liter Coke bottles, and that has to do everything. So if you think about how hard your blood has to work when you're exercising, it has to do an awful lot in terms of circulating oxygenated blood around your body. Next one, number 2, how many miles of blood vessels are there in your body? A, 60,000, B, 6, C 600, or D 6,000? What's it, Lamar? Was that for this question or the last one? Kayla, 600. Okay. Oh, Adil's got some stats in there. Yeah, maybe true. Okay, so take a punt on which one it is, Adil. Not bad, Troy. Yeah, I think you're right, right, Lamar. Okay. Yes, well done, Adil. Corrected it in. Well done. And well done, Kai. So yeah, a few good right answers there. So the actual answer is 60,000 miles. So I think the takeaway message from this is to know how we call it being vascular, how vascular your body is, how much blood vessels there are circulating or that make up your body. It's interesting. There's never an area where your body cells are more than a millimeter away from a capillary or a blood vessel. So we have a huge amount of blood vessels and capillaries in our body, enough to stretch 60 or we have 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels in our body. So it shows you how small they have to be able to perform their function and kind of fit inside of you. So incredibly, say fragile so much, but very delicate structures when you get down to the tiniest blood vessel. So we'll talk about what their structure is later on, and how they're able to be so small and so delicate. So which animal has the largest heart, and how much does it weigh roughly? The heart, not the animal. Come on, let's have a look. Kayla, C, blue whale. Well done, Adil. Well, most people have got this right. Yeah, good. Well done, everyone who said C. So it's a blue whale, and the heart. So this was, I think, the record heart. It was a blue whale that was around, I think, something like about 40 meters long, maybe slightly longer. And its heart weighed nearly 200 kilos. So about, well, at least two of me. So a huge structure to pump so much blood. It'd be interesting to see that in action. So I think this is the last one. Roughly, how much does an average human heart weigh? How much does a human heart weigh? So is it 250 to 300 grams, 100 to 150 grams, 300 to 400 grams, or 1 to 2 kilos? Everyone's gone high. Everyone's gone high. So yeah, you've all gone for D, which is up to 2 kilos. Kayla came in with a late right answer of A. So well done you. So 250 to 300 grams. So not huge. I'm trying to give you an equivalent. Just above a pound, isn't it? So a pound of sausages, if you can imagine one of these small little packs of 8 sausages, is about the same weight as a heart, or maybe actually a bit less. No, a bit less actually. About 2/3 of one of those packs of sausages. So really kind of not huge. It's about the size of a fist, and that size organ has to last your whole life, and every day pump all of your blood around all of those 60,000 miles of blood vessels. So incredibly efficient organ, and incredibly adaptable to change to our differing exercise status. So let's dig into each of these. So we've looked, I've tried to sort of get you thinking about the different components of our cardiovascular system. So here's a little bit about its function. So what's the lowest recorded human heart rate in a healthy living person? So what's the Guinness Book of Records lowest heart rate? So just pop in there your levels. Yeah, well done, Kayla. You're on fire today. So Kayla's gone in with D, 27 beats per minute. Um, this is I forget the person who's recorded. I remember there was a story a few years ago about a cyclist called Miguel Indurain, who was a Tour de France cyclist, and he was recorded. I think it was around 27 or 28 beats per minute. So this is a heartbeat that happens every two seconds. So incredibly powerful. So he has a very large left ventricle. So really big, powerful contractions, able to pump much more blood with each beat, but also means that he's using it very efficiently when it gets there. I suppose there's a limiting factor with how low your heart rate can go, in that heart blood is constantly returning to your heart as well. So it has to clear what's there. So if you went down as low as, say, let's say 10, blood will still be kind of returning to your lungs, and if your heart's not getting rid of it, then it's going to kind of build up and sort of flood the lungs. So it seems like the physiological kind of limit, if you like, is sort of in those mid to late 20s. So good, well done everybody. Some good answers, some good ideas. So let's dig into the blood. So on the right hand side, I've got a little picture of a test tube of blood. So what this is, how you normally get that, if you can imagine, we took a sample of blood and spun it round in something called a centrifuge. You may have seen these in labs. So what they do is they sort of spin the blood round, and over time what happens is the heavy stuff falls to the bottom of that test tube, and the light stuff graduates to the top. So that constant sort of spinning round acts as a separator in a way. So what you end up with is a test tube that would look a little bit like the one I've got there. So in our blood, we've got mostly this substance called plasma, and you may have seen people in hospitals or in ambulances sometimes, and they have a bag of sort of yellow stuff at the top dripping down. This is normally some form of plasma product. Maybe the person's become dehydrated, maybe they're losing fluid or losing plasma in their body. And the plasma helps to, it kind of provides that fluid portion of blood. The main thing we're kind of interested in terms of the function of blood, is red blood cells. So red blood cells are the bit that carry oxygen. So these are very specialist cells that are designed to pick up oxygen in the lungs and drop it off in the tissues that are working. So any tissue in the body that requires oxygen is going to need a supply of red cells. So to get there, those red cells need to be suspended in that plasma. If we run out of plasma, if we have too little plasma, i.e. we're dehydrated, that blood becomes too thick. It becomes difficult to pump. It becomes easier to clot. So people that are very dehydrated find exercise and working much, much harder. So red blood cells transport oxygen around the body. We also look in the middle, we've got some white blood cells and platelets. So white blood cells are a little bit bigger than red blood cells, and they perform lots of functions in the body. So for example, if I, let's say I sprained my ankle very badly, inside my ankle I've bled, so I've caused lots of bleeding. Now, white blood cells can actually go in and eat up debris. So eat up dead cells, eat up areas of infection. So they're they're tiny, but slightly bigger than red blood cells. So they go in, eat up stuff, spit it out. They act to attack viruses. They can act to attack bacteria. So they're part of our immune system. Platelets are little fragments of cells that circulate in the blood. And when we cut ourselves or we have an injury, platelets become activated. So they normally just circulate in the blood. And when we have an injury, they get activated at the site of that injury and they become sticky, and they start sticking together over the site of damage. So when you have a scab, when you have a cut, it's platelets activating, which make it go all kind of sticky and hard. So white blood cells fight infection. Our platelets provide clotting agents to aid in prevention of blood loss. And our plasma is that bit at the top, that liquid portion, the bit that everything else is suspended in. So as we get fitter, a couple of things happen. We grow slightly more red blood cells, but we also get slightly more plasma. So we improve the ability of our blood to carry oxygen and also to get it into those muscles. So red cells carry oxygen, white cells fight infection, platelets clot, and plasma provides that fluid portion of the blood, allows it to smoothly flow in our blood vessels. So just a quick word on our red blood cells. I'm going to just use the annotation part here, but do you see in that previous picture what red blood cells looks like? Now, this is one that's just cut in half, if you can see that. So a red blood cell looks like a kind of squashed donut. So it's that sort of concave shape, like a little donut, and you've just squished it. That kind of allows it to itself become squashed. So if it's traveling in blood vessels and it just sort of gets caught, it squashes, its size just sort of slightly squishes down, and it's able to be bashed around and sort of stacked and bashed. You know, it's got to get into some very tiny blood vessels. So a lot of the time it's just sort of squeezing through gaps, getting bashed around on its route. So that little circular shape is ideal for doing that. It has a substance in it called hemoglobin. Each molecule of hemoglobin looks a bit like this. We don't need to know too much about hemoglobin for today, but hemoglobin clips oxygen onto it where there's lots of oxygen. So where does red blood cells get their oxygen from? So where do red blood cells get its oxygen from? The lungs. Good, well done. Absolutely, Kayla. So they pass by the lungs, they pick up oxygen, they travel through the body, and then where there's areas of low oxygenation, so a working muscle, the hemoglobin unclips that oxygen and gives it to the muscles. So hemoglobin is really what carries oxygen inside blood cells. We have 270 million molecules of hemoglobin in each blood cell. Think of that, incredible. So in terms of the tininess of the structure, clever stuff. So that red blood cell shape is really important. It means the blood cells are able to squeeze through blood vessels, and it means they're able to kind of get bashed about, and they last generally about 90 to 120 days. At the bottom, you can see I've just linked a condition that affects red blood cells. So here, I've got that normal red blood cell shape, that little squished donut, we call it biconcave. It's concave at the top and concave at the bottom. At the bottom, I've got a sickle cell blood cell. So this happens, it's a genetic disease. And what it means that blood vessels are created that aren't that nice squished donut shape. They're almost a half moon shape. So they can still carry oxygen, they still have hemoglobin, but when they carry oxygen, they change shape into that little half moon. So if you imagine when those blood vessels get stacked up, when they get bashed around, they're not so resilient. So they die much sooner. So people that have sickle cell anemia have blood cells circulating that are getting destroyed often more quickly than they can be replaced. So there's often a lot of dysfunction related to damage in blood. So one of the first questions you have to answer is where your heart is. So have a look at that picture. Write in your chat box how you would describe the location of that heart. So fastest fingers, let's just type in, see what you say. Let's say what you see. So describe the location of that heart. That's good a deal. So center of the ribs, yeah, certainly it's covered by some of the ribs, isn't it? Definitely. Left center, good, Carl. Yeah, so if you look directly at the middle of that picture, you can see the heart is actually coming over to that left-hand side. Well done, Kai, good, yeah. Towards the left. Good, Luke, yeah. And that's quite interesting, actually. That's a good observation from you. Actually, our two lungs are very slightly different shapes. So our left lung is slightly smaller to accommodate that heart inside it. So the heart is located in the chest, good, as you said, slightly to the left of center, well done. It's behind the sternum. So this bone here, this breastplate, so this is a flat bone. So flat bones are generally there to protect. This is a kind of the big protector of our heart. So we can see it inside our chest. It actually sits between the lungs. I'm going to show you a picture in a second that shows that relationship. It's about the size of a fist, and its function is to pump blood around the body. So it's a big, powerful pump. So this is a top-down picture. It's quite a complex picture, but I thought it was quite a nice one just to kind of show a couple of things to you. So I'm just going to draw in on it. What's the best color? Oh, why not an orange? So let's just orientate ourselves. So as you look at this picture, this is kind of as if I've been cut off in the middle there. So you've kind of cut someone off just beneath the shoulders, and you're sort of showing that half of the body. So you're kind of looking down into someone. What you can see at the top here is the vertebrae. So the bottom, where I'm just coloring orange at the bottom, is the sternum. So the front is down, the back is at the top. Now, what you can see, I'm just coloring it now. This is the left lung. And I'll just do the right lung, the outer of the right lung. Now, so you can see those two lungs from the top view. I think it's quite a nice picture. So I'm now going to just take a different color, a vibrant pink, and I'm just going to outline where the heart is. So I'm just coloring around the heart there. So you can see now, as I do that, that actually the heart is really packed right in the center of those two lungs, as you all rightly said, slightly to the left of center. So you can see the lungs either side. You can see how close that sternum is to the front of the heart. The other thing I'll draw your attention to, because you might notice it later, I'm going to color it in red. It's already half red. But can you see I'm just coloring in the aorta here? This is your biggest artery in the body. This is the artery that your left ventricle is attached to. It's the major blood vessel that emerges at the top of your heart. So I think that's quite a nice picture to just see that heart packed into the middle of the chest. You can see how close the lungs are either side. The heart's in its own little sac to keep it slightly separate from them. Okay, there's going to be a question on this in a minute. So what you see on that right hand side is what we call a scheme of circulation. So do you recall where what I was trying to get you to do was envisage where the heart sits, kind of deep inside here. So this picture is a little bit anatomically incorrect, but there's two types of circulation that you need to know. We break down our circulation into the systemic and the pulmonary circulation. So our pulmonary circulation, this bit at the top, is responsible for oxygenating the blood. So what this comes from, can you see down here? I'm just colouring it in now. This is the right side of the heart. So blood has returned from the body up here. It's been used, so it's deoxygenated blood, and it returns to the right side of the heart. It enters the heart, and then it's pumped up through our, I've lost my bit, there we go. So it's pumped up to the lungs to be oxygenated in our pulmonary circulation. So you see, as it goes up to that pulmonary circulation, it arrives at the lungs blue, deoxygenated, and then it comes out of the lungs red. It's now oxygenated. So it's gone to the lungs, it's absorbed oxygen, and now it returns back to that heart. So at the heart, it arrives at the left atrium, and then it's pumped out to the body by the left ventricle. So you can see that nice red plume of blood coming out of the heart. And as you can see, it arrives through what we call the systemic circulation. So the systemic circulation is the part of our circulation that's responsible for supplying all of our muscles and all our systems. So that blood needs to power exercising muscles. It will need to be required to supply our liver so it can start processing blood. It needs to supply our digestive system, our spleen, our kidneys. All of these components require oxygenated blood, not just our muscles. So systemic is to the body's tissues, and pulmonary oxygenates the blood. So we'll just have a quick look at the structure of the heart. And then what I'm going to do, says my connection's unstable, so I might just take you to another room in a sec. If am I back? Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Someone give me a shout. Okay, I'll assume you can hear me. Good now, thank you. Okay, so recap then. So we looked at the location of the heart. We can describe it as being center of the chest, slightly left. We can describe it as being just behind the sternum, and we can describe it as being between the lungs. We can describe two parts of circulation. Our pulmonary circulation is where that blood is oxygenated, and the systemic circulation is where the blood is supplied to our systems and our muscles. So when we look at this structure of the heart, we should be thinking which bits receive blood from the body, which bits pump it out, and where to. So, boom, there's a lot there. Now, looking at that picture, so fastest fingers then, where do we receive deoxygenated blood from the body? Give me the blood vessel, please. The blood vessel that brings back deoxygenated blood from the body. Thank you, Luke. Yeah. So looking on this picture, RV, so it's the blood vessel. So I'm going to draw it in. Okay, so blood from my head and my arms is coming here. Blood from my body is coming here. So where it collects is here. RA. What does RA stand for? What does RA stand for? You've got it there. Right atrium. So atrium is somewhere where you collect. So an atrium is a collecting point. So blood has arrived to those blood vessels. So from the head and the arms, from the top, and then from the rest of the body underneath. Now, when that right atrium contracts, we have a wave of contraction. It pushes it down into this part here. So can you see it's now in that right ventricle? So the atrium has contracted. Now when the heart beats, those ventricles contract separately. So they squeeze blood upwards. So what you can see is that blood is going to come up out here to this pulmonary artery. So where does the pulmonary artery go? What did the pulmonary circulation do? Write it in the chat box. So where does the pulmonary artery go to? Anyone? Absolutely right, Kayla. Right into the lungs. Right side of the lung. Well, ideal, it goes to both lungs. It splits out. So we get the right ventricle pumps up and then it splits out to each lung. So we absolutely right. Well done. Well done, Lamar. So the pulmonary artery takes deoxygenated blood to the lungs. So it's gone up, spreads around the lungs, wraps around the alveoli. Now, I'm going to change my color because now it's become oxygenated. So that oxygenated blood, so you'll see I've got two pipes. Bringing that blood back to this area, this left atrium. So what we've got is blood now comes back from the lungs, collects in that left atrium. So as those atria are squeezed, they're both squeezed down into their ventricles. So what you can see is now it gets squeezed into that ventricle. So the left ventricle is the strongest part of the heart. So as we get fitter, the ventricle gets a little bit thicker. It gets more powerful. So when that ventricle squeezes, boom, it fires blood upwards. So here you can see it fires it up and out of that aorta. So the aorta is a big blood vessel, the one I showed you on that previous picture. So a bit of it dips back round the back of the heart, a little bit will go up to your head, a little bit snakes out to the arms. But the aorta is the biggest blood vessel there is. So we go right atrium, right ventricle, lungs, left atrium, left ventricle, body. So let's clear that off. So our 4 chambers then, you can see our atria if we start taking it away. So right and left atria. So does the left atrium have deoxygenated or oxygenated blood in it? Quick answer, quick answer. Oxygenated or deoxygenated in that left side? So deoxygenated, well done. Sorry, oxygenated, sorry, no. So the left atrium has oxygenated blood returning from the lungs, doesn't it? Oxygenated returning from the lungs. The left ventricle has oxygenated, and the right atrium has deoxygenated from the body. Okay, so just have a quick look at that picture, try and get that clear in your head. So, and there we've got our left and right ventricles. So right, deoxygenated. Adil says, Aston Villa. Okay. So we have the right and left atria and the right and left ventricles. So left side is oxygenation, right side is deoxygenated. And it always goes from atrium to ventricle. Atrium to ventricle. There we go. Aston Villa, as Adil's reminding me. AV, atrium to ventricle. Okay. So I'm going to pause. You're going to answer some questions for me. So what I'd like you to do is I just want you to take a piece of paper and I just want you to spend 3 or 4 minutes and I just want you to write down your answers to completing these sentences. So essentially the first bit is asking you to locate the heart. So what I'd like you to use is those, as a minimum, those 4 words in your description of where the heart is. So you're going to say the heart is located, and then you're going to say, use the words thorax, sternum, lungs, and left. So this is just taking a sheet of any paper, so a rough sheet of paper. So just practice. You're going to describe where the heart pumps blood to, and you're going to finish my explanation there. The heart consists of however many chambers. You're going to say the whatever they are at the top, and the more powerful whatever chambers they are at the bottom. The right ventricle pumps blood to wherever it pumps blood to, whilst the larger left ventricle pumps blood to wherever you feel that pumps blood to. So I'm going to just let you work on that for, well, it shouldn't be long, 4 minutes, but try and write it out in full. And then I'm going to sort of check your understanding in the chat box. So just have a go at writing that out. Paige has just asked which pages you're using. I say you're not writing into your workbooks yet, but on your textbook, on the big PDF textbook I sent you earlier, you're on around page 40, I think it is, the cardiovascular system, if you need to go back over any of it. So have a look at that, and I'll sort of report. I'll get you to report back in about 4 minutes. Okay, get you. Okay. So hopefully you've had a little crack at that, and sort of came up with some ideas. So essentially these are very close to the sort of things you're going to be asked to do in your workbook. So if you take time to just begin refining it now, hopefully you'll have some success filling that in. So the first one just asks you to describe the location. So you could just say the heart is located slightly, you could say in the middle of the thorax, slightly to the left of center. It sits between the lungs, just behind the sternum. So as long as you've used those 4 words in any order, I'll be happy. And as long as it's a nice sort of flowing sentence. So you're going to be asked to describe the function of the heart, and really it is a pump. Its main function is to pump blood to 2 areas. So you should have mentioned that it pumps blood to the lungs to become oxygenated, and then it pumps blood to the body through the systemic circulation to provide muscles and organs with oxygenated blood. So then you fill in this other one. So hopefully, let's just run through this so you've all got a nice sort of answer. So the heart consists of, it should be 4 chambers. The atria or atrium, the atria are at the top, and the more powerful ventricles are at the bottom. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs, whilst the larger left ventricle pumps blood to the rest of the body or muscles and organs, whatever you want to say, as long as you get across that distinction in those 2 parts of circulation. Okay, so just a little note on the relationship between the heart and the lungs. So we refer to it as the cardiorespiratory system. So we're doing the cardiovascular system. So this is the heart, the blood, and the vascular system, i.e. blood vessels. This is kind of tying it into the respiratory part, the lungs that are attached. So here we've got a nice little picture of an alveoli. So here we've got lungs, and at the bottom of lungs, so as you sort of breathe air in, it goes down your trachea. The trachea branches out into bronchi, which go into bronchioles, which go smaller and smaller and smaller, until we finally get to these tiny little air sacs. The air sacs are so small that if you spread their surface area out, it will cover a couple of tennis courts. So they're tiny little sacs, and the sacs, as you breathe in, oxygen is transferred through their membrane into our blood vessels. So here we've got blood vessels wrapping around these alveoli. So oxygen comes in to the alveoli, oxygen gets transferred into the blood, and then it's taken away to go back to the heart. By diffusion, that's the process. So the air that we breathe in has a high concentration of oxygen. So oxygen diffuses into the blood across that membrane. So here on the left side, you've just seen that oxygenated blood arrive back at that left atrium. From that left atrium shown there, it goes through to that left ventricle. So where's it going to go? What blood vessel is it going to leave that left ventricle from? Who can give it to me on the chat box? Which is that big blood vessel leading out of the aorta. So it's gone left atrium, left ventricle, boom, out. Where's it coming from? Any answers? Any answers? Big blood vessel. There we go, out of the aorta. So the aorta is the biggest artery in the body. So that's quite a nice little sort of summary of where it is. Well done, Paige, on there with aorta. Good. So we'll now look at our passage of blood. So here we've got oxygen-rich blood from the lungs left atrium, left ventricle, out to the body. So you can see it exiting that aorta. What it hasn't got there is the stuff going up to the brain. So there's a little branch of the aorta, goes up to the brain. Our brain it requires an awful lot of oxygenated blood. Hence why if we stand up too quickly, sometimes we kind of faint because our brain's temporarily not getting enough oxygenated blood. So then, once it's used, it comes back deoxygenated. So can you remember the name of that blood vessel that brings deoxygenated blood back? It begins with a V. It's called the vena cava. So the vena cava, you can see, is bringing blood back to the right atrium. It gets passed through to the right ventricle. Now, who can give me the name of the blood vessel it's going to use to get to the lungs? Anyone? Anyone? Pulmonary artery, well done. The only artery in the body that carries deoxygenated blood. So this is under high pressure, bringing all that blood to the lungs. So we can see there, and the pulmonary artery brings blood to to get rid of carbon dioxide and take in lots of oxygen. So that's the two processes. So here we can see carbon dioxide. The muscles, when they work, they produce carbon dioxide. They bring that carbon dioxide back to the lungs for us to breathe it out. If we have too much carbon dioxide in our blood, it turns the blood acidic. A chain of reactions happen which make our blood acidic. So here we've got carbon dioxide being passed into the blood by diffusion, and then it's breathed out through our lungs. Off we go. So there we go. So arrives at the vena cava, collects at that right atrium, passed through to the right ventricle, up the pulmonary artery to the lungs. So you're hopefully getting a nice picture of those two circulations. So we've done a lot. Now, what we're going to do, I want you to look at this screen and I want you to match up the terms. So you've been given, on the left-hand side, there's 6 kind of terms or structures, and on the right-hand side, you've got a letter and a structure. So what I need you to do, I want you to match up the structure. So I want you to look at number 1, which is the flat bone that protects the heart that lies just behind it. Or protects the heart that lies just behind it. Sort of phrased that badly, I think. Look on there, and I want you to go down and see who's done that. How did you manage that? Incredible. So you look down the flat bone that protects the heart that lies just behind it. I'm going to have to manage this. There we go. Clear all drawings. So well done, whoever did that. I don't know how you managed to get control. I'll do it again. So yeah, absolutely. There we are. If you can do that on your screens, fantastic. Otherwise, just write it into the chat box. So there we go. So flat bone that protects the heart that lies behind it. The fluid portion of blood that is a straw-like color. A heart chamber that collects deoxygenated blood from the body. So that's your job. Just spend a couple of minutes working through that. I'm trying to get you to really think of the terminology that we can use. Okay, so really think about how you can use this terminology in your own descriptions. That's good, Adil. Yeah, good couple from you. Well done. Keep it up. Good. A couple of good ideas coming in already. Okay, so just start writing in the chat box your answers. Let's just put it. Let's just make sure we've got it in. Who's finding? Who can keep managing to use my screen? Plasma 2, good, well done. To manage these participants. Yeah, good page, good start, well done. So I'll do a bit of this. So yeah, the first three most people have got now. So we've got number 1. Most people have got number 2. The heart that collects deoxygenated blood from the body. Most people have got that. So let's just make sure we've got the last 3. The deal's given me this one. So 2 more. Couple more, please. Come on. Let's get these chat box filled up. Got 2 more. Well done, Kayla. 4C. Good. Now that leaves us 1 left. There we go. Well done. Amazing. Right. Well done, everybody. So some nice answers there. Nicely done. I don't know if you've started using your book as well. That's great if you have. That's some good answers there. And well done to whoever managed to tap into my my screen and start changing things. But it was very restrained of you. You could have drawn anything. Okay, there we go. So let me just clear that off. So some nice ideas there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pause there for a while. And I'm going to just give us a quick 10-minute break just to go away and refresh. So it's 5 past now. So if we can come back at 1/4 past, then we'll press on. I'll just pause the presentation and press on when we come back. Okay, so let's. So we just finished that. So some really nice answers on those little bits of terminology. So let's press on. So another task. So you're asked in small groups. We obviously can't do small groups, but draw the passage of oxygen from the air to the muscles on the paper provided. Well, I haven't provided you with paper. You should have provided your own paper. If you haven't got a bit of what's quite nice, if you can actually physically draw out the location of lungs, draw out the location of the heart, and then draw something to represent the body. So I want you to just sort of try quickly sketching it. I'll sketch my own and we can compare and contrast. So I'm going to grab a piece of paper. I'll do it. Whilst I'm doing it, I want you having a go. And then I'll hold mine up, my version up. And I may even open up some of your screens to see if you can show me what you've done. Okay, so let's get to it. So draw a nice little something to represent where the lungs are, something to represent where the heart is, something to represent the body. And I just want you to be able to show on your picture the passage of an oxygen molecule as it goes around that whole system. So I'm a terrible drawer, so you're bound to be better than me. So here's the competition. Let's start now. Okay, go. Okay, so I'm going to share with you mine. There's some lungs. Oh, this is hard. So here's my oxygen molecule coming into my lungs at the alveoli, arrives at the left atrium, the left ventricles, pump to the muscle. Oh, I didn't include the aorta. So the aorta just comes off the left ventricle. So what we should have gone is some sort of diagram that shows you starting at the lungs, blood transfers across, oxygen transfers across into the blood at the alveoli, comes back to the heart via the pulmonary vein, arrives at the left atrium, gets transferred to that left ventricle. That left ventricle exits the heart at the aorta, travels through arteries, then arterioles, and then finally ends up at muscle. So as long as you've got that somewhere in your diagram, then you can give yourself a little pat on the back. So well done. Let me just clear those off. So well done. So again, here's the nice picture of that pattern. So again, if you just follow it through, you can start to see that little process. So here we are. Let's start at the lungs at the top. So lungs coming back to the heart. Here, out the aorta, down the arteries, slows down as it reaches these thinner arterioles, across the capillary bed, up the vena cava, back to the right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary artery, back to the lung. So a nice little circuit of circulation. You've got that lovely pulmonary circulation at the top, this systemic circulation at the bottom. So let me just clear that off. Oh. Okay. So we're now looking at blood vessels. Look, just the process it travels. I'm just going to go back over that quickly. So let's just do this in one go. So I'm going to sort of mention a couple of blood vessels we're going to talk about in a second. So this is quite useful for us to go through. So let's take a nice sort of neutral color. So orange. So we breathe in. That air goes down the trachea, bronchi. It arrives at the alveoli. So here, there's going to be an alveoli. That blood picks up oxygen, comes back to the left atrium here. So it's tipped into that left atrium. From there, it travels through the left ventricle, this area here, and it's pumped out the aorta, out through big arteries. So here, the blood's under very high pressure. So arteries need to have thick, kind of elastic and muscular walls because that blood is under such high pressure. So it's being pulled out, think about it, it's got to pump from your heart and it's got to really oxygenate, be able to oxygenate every tissue in your body. So it's under a huge amount of pressure. So artery walls are quite thick. So as it travels through those arteries, it begins to branch out into smaller arterioles. And these are just similar structure, quite thick, but just a little bit smaller. And they begin to slow down that blood. Here, where they get to capillaries, that blood is now nice and slow. It allows gas to be transferred from the capillary into the tissues. Now that deoxygenated blood is now finding its way back through our veins to arrive at our right atrium. Right atrium goes through to right ventricle, which passes up to our lungs. So we've got those two kind of continuous systems: pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation. Okay, so arteries take blood away from the heart and have a muscular wall. So if you look at that picture of the artery, what you can see is that very thick wall. So it's kind of covered in, I'm just labeling it here. Can you see that thick sort of brown area there? That is muscle. Now, why would an artery need muscle? Put your ideas in the chat box. Why would an artery need muscle in it? Yes. So why? So yeah, takes great force. That's the one, Kyla. Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah, I would say. Any other ideas from anyone? So why have we got muscle surrounding those tubes of blood vessel? What does that do? What's that going to do to the body? Yeah, maybe a little bit of protection, Troy. Yeah, good. Kyle, yeah. There's a little bit of that. So there's a couple of other reasons actually. One thing is, remember how much blood we have in the body? Can you remember how much? It was just under 6 liters. Now, if you think about it, when you start exercising, you know, at rest, you're presumably not using much of your, you know, your muscles aren't working very hard. So that 6 liters of blood we have, or 5.5 liters of blood, is kind of just enough. Now, when you start exercising, your muscles begin to demand blood. They need much more, don't they? So how does that blood know to go there and not go to your digestive system? Well, a little bit is about the smooth muscle. It squeezes. It doesn't pump, but it squeezes to block off blood flow. So if you think, if you have a great big meal, let's say you've had a nice sort of Sunday dinner, and immediately you get up, run 100 meters, and then jump in a swimming pool. Now, that's not going to end well. So your body at that point has got those sort of twin demands. It kind of wants to digest your food, but it also wants those muscles to do their work. So what our body does when we're exercising, and why we shouldn't eat just before we exercise, is that when we exercise, our body shuts down blood vessels to our digestive system and opens them up at our working muscles. So the muscle in blood vessels is, one, to allow it to take the stress, take that extra force of blood being passed through. But number two, it changes blood flow. So if you've ever had butterflies in your stomach, that feeling of real nervousness, this is being caused by blood vessels squeezing and limiting blood flow to your digestive system. So smooth muscle allows us to redistribute blood. You can see veins have got much less muscle. So they've got a little fibrous outer layer, in the same way that arteries have a slightly fibrous outer layer. Adil, yeah, it's absolutely, it's called shunting. So it's called blood shunting. When we start exercising, our blood is shunted away from our digestive tract towards our working muscles. At the bottom, we've got a capillary. Now, if you look at that capillary in a little bit more closely, you can see how thin it is. So it's 1 cell thick. So I'm going to just sort of try and outline a cell. That's quite difficult. we go. So they're very thin. They're 1 cell thick. So what it means is that when blood passes through capillaries, oxygen is able to pass through that cell wall into the muscle tissue, and it's able to drop off oxygen and bring carbon dioxide back in the other direction. So our blood vessels have a thick muscular wall to absorb that pressure and to be able to change blood flow. Veins are a bit sort of thinner and a little bit baggier, and I'll show you how their structure's specialized in a second. So arteries have a thick muscular wall to withstand high pressure. Muscle allows the artery to narrow to slow blood flow. So I asked the question, why would it do that? And it's to allow blood to be available to the working muscles. So to keep it available for working muscles. So when you exercise, your body has to make a choice. Do I keep digesting food, or do I supply blood to those working muscles? And one of the things that exercise does is it causes arteries in muscles to relax and widen. So why would it need to do that? Why does it do that? Well, we need more oxygenated blood into that muscle. And that's why it's important to take time to warm up prior to exercise, because as well as getting that heart ready, it changes blood flow in the body. It allows time for blood to be squeezed away or restricted from going to the digestive system. And it allows the blood vessels in the working muscles to open up, readying you for that exercise. Now, veins have an important function too. They bring blood back to the heart, but they all have an interesting structure. So veins have valves. So what we've got here, you can see a little vein, and can you see the shape of that valve I'm just covering in here? So 2 valves there. So a valve that's shaped a little bit like that. So in this picture, the blood is traveling upwards. Now, veins go through the middle of muscles. When muscles contract, they squeeze. So they squeeze a bit like if you, imagine if you just got a tube of toothpaste and the cap was on. If you squeezed it, it's not going to go anywhere. If you took the cap off and squeezed it, it shoots up. Similar sort of thing here. The bottom valve means that when you squeeze that toothpaste, the bottom is locked, but the valve at the top is shaped like this. So when you squeeze that toothpaste, it opens and it's allowed to squeeze up. So veins have got valves which stop blood going back down and mean that when you squeeze a vein, blood is able to go up. So they're non-return valves. So they rely on that muscle contraction to gently squeeze the vein, and the valves allow the passage of blood upwards back towards the heart. It is possible for those valves to fail. So if they fail and get obliterated, then you can get big blobs of blood building up and the vein can widen. You may have heard the term varicose veins. It's exactly that. It's the valves failing and the size of the vein increasing and becoming sort of stretched and inflamed. And here's a nice picture of a capillary. So you can see that it's nice and thin, a single cell thick, and it allows gas exchange to happen. So fluid can leak from the capillaries, if it happens. So under high pressure, fluid can leak out of those capillaries. Can you see on that picture, the cell wall, the capillary wall has got, you can see where the cells kind of join together. So I'll just sort of pop a little note on that. But what you can see, can you see here? So what I'm just outlining here, each one of those is an individual cell and they join together like a sort of patchwork. Now, where I used to go to the gym, which is like quite a nice David Lloyd gym, on a Friday, you would have all the chaps lined up in front of the mirror doing sort of big bicep curls and sort of checking themselves out. And what they're doing is they're kind of getting that kind of Friday night pump as they squeeze those muscles, as the muscles have to work super hard because of the bicep curling they're doing. It squeezes the blood vessels, and a bit of fluid, that plasma, can just leak out of those capillaries. Now, ordinarily, it just sort of finds its way back into that capillary. It can be taken up by something called the lymphatic system, but temporarily, what you end up with is you end up with slightly swollen tissues. So that kind of Friday night pump is really just a bit of plasma that's leaked into that tissue space. It's temporary, gone in sort of an hour or so usually, but it's just fluid. Building muscle takes time, 6 weeks plus, before you can really see a difference. And this picture just shows capillaries in action. So this is the bottom of a lung. So on the left-hand side, you can see the bronchiole, and there we've got alveoli, and so alveoli being air, and the capillaries wrap around the alveoli, and oxygen is able to be transferred into those alveoli. So you can see there it's arriving blue, deoxygenated, and you can see it exits red, so it's oxygenated. So think about which part of the heart that oxygenated blood is going to return to. It's going to go back to that left atrium, and then the left ventricle, then out the aorta, and then to the body. So here just shows that nice pulmonary and systemic circulation. So hopefully by now you're just starting to pick up the terminology. You're just able to look at that and see, okay, I can see exactly what's what. You can see the format there, that pulmonary circulation, and then out here from the aorta, that systemic circulation. So I'm going to ask you in a second to go back to your course books. Let me just clear that. So blood gets back to the heart by a process called venous return. So I'll talk through that another day. What I want to do, I'm going to pause here and ask you to answer the first couple of questions in your workbook, just so we know exactly where you are. Adil, I'll talk to you in a second. So what I'd like you to do is this. You should have a copy of this. If you haven't, I can email you an electronic version straight away. It doesn't matter if you type into the electronic version or if you just write, handwrite, but neatly on another separate sheet just for the minute. What you're going to do, I want you to just complete on page 4, just that first page. So all you're doing, it's got 3 sections. One asks you to identify the location of the heart. So if you think back to what we were doing earlier, that exercise where I got you to think about the location and think about the terminology you're using here was quite a good start. Next, you're describing 2 functions of the heart. So 2 areas where the heart pumps blood to. And then you're describing the structure of the heart, i.e. the chambers, and how blood moves through those 4 chambers of the heart. So what I'm going to get you to do, I'm going to pause my presentation, and I want you to just have a go at that for 10 minutes, if I may. And then what I can do as that's happening, I'll just attend to a couple of people on the chat box who've asked me questions, and I can email out anyone who's not got that course book with them yet. So I'm going to pause the presentation. I'm going to let you crack on with that for 10 minutes, and then we'll regroup when you found it, once you've had a little go at that. Okay, so well done everyone so far. Recording again. So if you just stop your writing there for a second. So hopefully you managed to get, if not all of it done, most of page 4. So there may be a bit of kind of going back over your course book a little bit. But hopefully it wasn't too difficult for you. I just want to look at the final 3 before we finish for the day. On page 5. So can you just have a quick look over those questions on page 5? It's asking you, number 1, to describe the difference between the systemic and pulmonary circulation. Then describe the structure and function of blood vessels, and then explain what's meant by the term blood pressure. So I'm just going to bring up a slide on here. So we'll look at the difference between systemic and pulmonary circulation. So can you just write in the chat box any ideas that you have about the differences between those 2 sections? And what we'll do is we'll add them to this whiteboard. So what have we got in terms of the difference between pulmonary and circulation? Sorry, it's pulmonary and systemic. So anyone, give me some ideas. Good, yeah. To the lungs, really. Can't type, can I? More haste, less speed. Anything else? What about things like size of blood vessels, how far it has to travel? Is there anything else we can add in there? What type of blood does the pulmonary circulation start with? Good. Which one's got the biggest blood vessel leading from it? Pulmonary or systemic? Yeah, good. Systemic travels much further. Good. So this is kind of justifying why that left ventricle is so much bigger. Good. So you've got some ideas there. You could also say the okay, so you've got some ideas there. So pulmonary versus systemic. So essentially, when you're describing the difference between the systemic and pulmonary circulation, you can say the pulmonary circulation starts with deoxygenated blood. The purpose of the system is to oxygenate the blood. You can explain that the systemic circulation starts with oxygenated blood and delivers it to every tissue in the body. you can say that it has a much longer circuit to go through, so blood needs to be pumped at possibly a higher pressure when it leaves the heart. So this is maybe why the aorta is the largest blood vessel in the body. So hopefully you got some ideas there. We'll now look at the structure and function of blood vessels. So can someone write in the chat box the structure of a capillary for me, please? Structure of a capillary. So what's a capillary going to look like? What's the first thing you're going to say when you're asked to describe the structure of a capillary? So walls, what about the walls? Thin walls. What does that thin wall allow in a capillary? What does it allow? Anyone? What does the blood give to the muscle? Blood vessels to travel, maybe a little bit. Diffusion, absolutely. Yeah, so the thin walls allow diffusion. So gases are able to go from areas of high concentration, like in the blood, into the muscles. It also allows a transfer of nutrients as well. So things like nutrients, vitamins, fuels, these kind of things are able to be carried in the blood and then transferred through those capillaries. Okay, so what are we going to say about arteries then? What can we say about arteries? Arteries. What do they allow? Yeah, so this is for 1.6 on page 5, Luke, absolutely. Kayla, no idea, surely. So what do arteries do? They carry blood under high pressure. So yes, this is page 5, this is 1.6. So arteries carry blood under high pressure. What is it about their structure that allows them to do that? Anyone? Are they thin or thick? Good stuff. Well done, Kayla. Thick walls. They have a slightly elastic property. So when the heart beats under high pressure, the artery just slightly stretches and then recoils, slightly stretches and then recoils. So they're thick elastic wall. What else did they have in their walls? They have a muscular layer. Yeah, absolutely. Look, muscle allows. So yeah, the artery allows the artery are allowed to narrow, which changes blood flow into those muscles. So a muscular layer provides further strength and allows those blood vessels to alter blood flow. So it can shut down blood supply to the digestive system. It can begin opening up blood supply to working muscles. Good. So lastly, what special feature are we saying about veins? So veins. They have a slightly more slightly more sort of fibrous wall, a little bit baggier. They do have a thin layer of muscle veins, so when we start exercising, they just squeeze ever so slightly. So a lot of blood we have is just sort of kind of sitting in our veins, and when we begin moving, they just squeeze, which sort of mobilizes and liberates a lot of blood. But they have this sort of fibrous, quite sort of baggy wall, and so they rely on muscle movement to bring blood back to the central heart. So good. Exercise causes blood in the arteries in muscles to relax and widen. Yeah, to a degree. What do veins have that help bring blood back to the heart? Anyone? What do they have? Good. Well done, Kayla. So to kind of give you a little bit of guidance, there's some ideas. Don't sort of copy exactly what I've written there, but those are the kind of key points that I'm looking for you to get out. So what you should have is, now you've mostly done that part 1 to 1.4. There's your 1.5 and 1.6 kind of planned off. And then what I think I'll do is I'll leave blood pressure off for tomorrow, and we'll do that in one hit. So what I'd like you to do is, before we start tomorrow, I want you to all have completed the circulatory system, this whole side, and then the first 2 questions on that page. Okay, so it's up to 1.6, including 1.6. Okay, so well done, everybody. We've covered an awful lot today. But hopefully we've kind of gone into a depth that makes you kind of think about the structures in a little bit more depth, and kind of give you a nice sort of grounding, and to be able to be thinking particularly about what changes when we get fitter. I think it's really important to understand these systems, so we can understand how, when we train, they get better, things change, things get adapted, and we can sort of quite confidently say what adaptations we're looking to get from our clients or from our athletes, and maybe ourselves. So I'll leave that with you today. I'll be here for another hour to answer questions should you wish, and I'll try and put this presentation up on YouTube if there's anything you need to go over again. Okay, otherwise I'll leave you, and thank you very much. I'll stop the recording now. Thank you.